You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cantina Cast. My name is Albert Padilla, and this is episode 588, where tonight we're going to break down the third episode of Skeleton Crew. This is an episode that, honestly, just continued with the momentum. It was great out of the gate. It ended really well. Gave us a lot of answers. Honestly, if you really think about it, there were a lot of answers, but then it opened up a number of other questions, which is what we really love in Star Wars. Just that continuous conversation, that continuous engagement with the show. And it certainly gives us content creators something to talk about because we have a lot to discuss today, and we'll have a lot to discuss this weekend on the Patreon show. And joining me, as always, to break down this week's episode is Jonesy. Jonesy, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm glad the show is still going pretty strong here, and it's just really enjoyable. I mean, it's nice to have a really clean adventure movie that just kind of keeps showing you things, giving you a little bit more. It's teasing you, but it's not teasing you in the wrong ways. And it like you said, it does give you enough answers to keep going, which I really do appreciate. Sometimes it gets a little exhausting to constantly have to ask more questions, and then you get more questions for your answers to your previous questions. So
yeah,
this is really refreshing. And I think the entire cast is doing just a really amazing job so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking to Lauren about this. She hadn't seen the first two episodes, at least as recently as last week when we did our recording. And she asked me, what is the show like? And I'm like, it's actually really wholesome, which if you know Lauren, that is something that is right up her alley. And so she was super stoked and super excited. I think she had kind of a bad taste in her mouth with what was happening off the air on social media with the Acolyte, that she really wasn't sure what to expect with this one. But, it is one of the more wholesome shows. But at the same time, like you said, it's thrilling, it's engaging, it's a lot of fun. And we're going to get into all of that. But before we do, I know you want to say thank you to some special folks.
Yeah, special welcome to Mike R., who just joined Patreon just a short bit before the show. So
hey,
welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for joining the This Is the Way tier, Mike. Good to see you in the chat as well. And a special thanks to all of our Patreon members, but especially our now part of the tribe members, Alex, Raphael, Danny, Mike, Lauren, Dante, Riss, Jackson, Sharkman, Dan, Daz, Isabella, Uncle Leon, Josh, Jacob, and Rita Reborn. And of course, our Delusions of Grandeur members, our top tier. Now, this is Rod Racing, CJ, Steve, and Rob. CantinaCast.com/Patreon. If you're curious about Patreon, we just did a whole breakdown of At Attin. And Albert's probably got a cockamamie idea about what's going to happen this Sunday for Patreon. So
I do, and I'll tell you in a minute here.
Oh, in just a minute? Okay, we have to wait for it. Great. This is fantastic. Yeah, so, and then in our live stream tonight, if you're curious about the live stream, cantinacast.com/YouTube, you can come out and visit us. Join in the chat. We'll get your comments up on there. We like to say hello to you before and after the show, like these amazing people, Stephanie, Mike R., Mike Draco, my Star Wars guys, Alex, Rita Reborn, One versus CPU. We see you folks in the background too. Please do come out and say hello. And if you didn't know, we've got a contest going right now, Albert.
Yeah, we do. So we've got, we're going to give away a poster again tonight. I was reaching over to grab the poster and I knocked over one of my ghost toys. But this is the poster. This is an official poster. It's heavy stock. It's got Mufasa in the background. So again, if you don't like Skeleton Crew, I don't know what the hell you're doing here. But if you don't, you can always just frame Mufasa. But yeah, we'll be giving one of these away right tonight. We'll announce the winner at the very end once we get through all the questions, and then we'll continue to give one poster away every single episode that we break down, and then we'll probably have a couple left over at the very end. So we'll have to do something special. I don't know. Maybe we'll do a wrap up, or maybe a special Patreon episode or something. I don't know. We haven't really thought about that, but there are a couple that I've got still to give away even after we're done there. Okay, this weekend. I want to get into the jewels of the old Republic. And so it'll be we're not going to get through everything tonight because there's a lot here to really talk about outside of that. We will touch on the jewels of the old Republic. We're definitely going to talk about some of the new information that we got about At Attin, but I really want to save a lot of that theory and tinfoil hat stuff for the Patreon show. So that'll be on Sunday. We'll get into much more detail on those topics on Sunday. So join us for that if you're a Patreon member. That's always a lot of fun. We had a great time breaking down At Attin. And honestly, I've been still trying to keep up with what people are coming up with theories and stuff. And I got to say, hey, we have to pat ourselves on the back. I think we did a good job of really throwing everything out there and then some things that I don't think people are still talking about or caught on to just yet. So So much fun.
Some of the things we've talked about in the show are proven to be pretty true as well, even back to the final hype show and before. And I think that's partially the show is a little bit prescriptive in that way. So which is okay. I think it's okay for things to be prescriptive if you do it well. So it's nice that we have kind of a good mix here of interesting theory that proves to be true and a little bit of fun stuff too. So this is all going in the right direction.
All right, well, let's get into it. Let's dive right into our breakdown. And we usually start with our opening thoughts. So I'll give you the floor. What did you think about this episode? What were some of your opening thoughts here?
Yeah. Early on, I was concerned that the At Attin storyline, the parent storyline, would weigh the show down. And I know a lot of people are actually pretty positive about it, but I don't think I'm really wrong in this regard quite yet. We did get a little bit of background, though, in the characters. And I think some of the things we speculated on in our Patreon show also came to light here about how much they care. But I don't know that I care about this part of the story very much. I want to get back to the adventure with the kids and with Jod and that aspect of it. But there's clearly something here. There's something that's not right. So I like that we're getting that flavor. What's really important to me is we're not staying on that Attin very much, and we're getting back to that adventure. And I like that. I like that a lot. I like that the story is continuing on. Like I said, kind of at the top, we're getting answers to questions, not just more questions to it. I like that the characters are challenging, like what's going on, like the kids sitting around the table, like wondering what's going on and trying to piece it together themselves. I really enjoyed that. I thought that was kind of good self-awareness that the show isn't going to, like, we'll just use Acolyte for an example, right? Well, I need to tell you a story, OSHA and all of that, and then we drag that on. Like the kids are just kind of solving it themselves,
right? And
they're figuring out what each parents do. I like that, when they're doing that. I think the Jod Na Nawood character is really working well too. You start to see all the different sides of the character, all the interesting aspects of it. Can you trust him? Are there genuine moments in the character? Possibly. And it's just Jude Law's really bringing that to life and doing well. I think they've just really crafted a good story here. And then you layer on top of that this whole idea of jewels of the old Republic, and don't really give us a whole lot. And I don't know that this show is going to show us and really explain a lot of that aspect of the actual old Republic lore. But man, we got a huge lore drop on us with this stuff, right? Which is really cool and it's a huge seed planting for us for other content later on. We were wondering if we were going to get some of that. And we were wondering if that was going to be more in the Mandalorian type of stuff. But man, this just keeps seeding stuff into the past, which I think is actually probably more fun. But, I just love the adventure nature of this. I think this is really working well. I'm not ready to, I think on social media you had said, sign it up for another season. I'm not ready to go that far yet. We're only in episode 3, my friend. We have to see how well there's a lot of things that work into that. Mike Rondo and actually we're kind of talking about this today too, of some of the excitement and people wanting to, like, let's get more of this. Let's let this play out. Let's kind of see how this rolls up and finishes up first. But I understand the enthusiasm behind it. This is really refreshing to have this type of story, and I'm here for the ride. I think this is really good. I wasn't really looking overly forward to Skeleton Crew just a couple of months ago, and now I'm happy to say it's kind of what I needed, I think, for my Star Wars soul in some kind of ways too. And I think a lot of people are probably in that same boat. It just feels good to feel good about the content. And I think that's a lot of fun right now.
Yeah. And there's something about, I don't know what it is, and this is not everybody, right? But something about this show coming out during, the most wonderful time of the year, right? During the holidays. There's just something magical about all this too, that I think people are catching, and that they don't realize it or aren't self-aware that that's how helping. There's something about that spirit that's in the air as well on top of that. But going back to, first off, yes, I am all for signing up a season 2. Like, I don't know what we're talking about. Just do it, right? I mean, it's at this point, I don't see how the wheels could come off the car or the ship or whatever. But as far as initial thoughts,
we kind of thought that at episode 4 and 5 of Acolyte too.
Yeah, but this one seems it's a
little bit different.
It's a little, I wouldn't say predictable, but it feels very grounded. They weren't really trying to be edgy or trying to get out there too far. But yeah, so I would say that I'm really enjoying the music. Like, I heard more of the music this episode than I did the first 2. It stood out more to me.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I haven't had it's only been 24 hours.
I have some theories.
Okay. Well, hold on to, I want to hear, I'll come back to you on that one, because I there's something about the music that is really starting to surface, percolate a little bit more than I had during the first 2 episodes. I like that this show never takes itself too seriously, right?
Yeah,
it's grounded, and there's certainly adventure, and, it's believable. They're not breaking the fourth wall or anything like that. But at the same time, there's some levity about the characters and the show itself, and maybe even just the way Jude Law is portraying some of the characters. But that is really at its core, something that I feel is very foundational, very fundamental to what good Star Wars is, right? It reminds me of a lot of what we got during the original trilogy with George Lucas. So enjoyed that. As a parent, I'm really enjoying the kid aspects of this. All the little nuances, the things that they're doing. We had a great moment with Fern saying, well, I'm not even ready to go. I'm not even tired yet. And then they cut to her snoring. That is, I mean, just, pure cinema as far as I'm concerned.
Parent 101 moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's lots of them, right? And there's just moments that you see the kids doing things. And we're going to talk about some of them in tonight's breakdown, but there's things that the kids are doing that are very grounded in reality. And they're just natural things that kids would do. They're just doing them in Star Wars, or they're doing them while they're holding a blaster, as one case may be. So I really enjoy that. It's great writing. And it speaks to two people that really understand what, parenting's like, or what that kid experience is like. And that seeps through and it comes through on the episode. So enjoy that. And then the last point on this is kind of what you were touching on there at the very end, which is the world building. I'm with you. Like, I don't know that we're going to get any more than just references. And this is what we talked about in the Patreon show. We were hoping they would start laying down some things, and things that are important to that service the story that's being told, but we don't necessarily need to go figure out, or it's not going to have any kind of, really deeper impact on what's happening in that story, if that makes any sense. But yeah, the world building that's happening, whether it's, the jewels of the, what was it? The jewel, I already forgot the stupid name of it, but
Jewels of the Old Republic.
Yeah, Jewels of the Old Republic, or At Attin, or Kim, and why she's on this planet, and the star maps that she's got, right? These charts that she has, just stuff like that really kind of continue to kind of bolt on to this expansive world that we already have of Star Wars, is really a lot of fun to think about. It's a lot of fun to discuss, and it certainly opens up pathways for other, again, authors or storytellers in Star Wars to pick that stuff and run with it. So maybe it's James Mangold, maybe it's whoever decides to do an Old Republic TV series or cartoon or Old Republic movie, hopefully, right? That's going to be there and they can work off that. That's something to build upon. So excited that we're getting so much of that world building in here, and still feel like we're not really changing the cosmos, no pun intended in that at the same time. So, you said something about the music. I want to come back to that because I don't know if we're going to get a chance to really kind of talk about it through the course of the breakdown, but what did you mean by that? You said there was probably a reason why we were focusing on the music, or we're hearing it more than we did the first two.
Well, I think there were some really familiar tones that came through, and Michael in the chat actually talked about the theremin, right? So towards the end of the episode, you have the theremin, right, which has been used in like Lost in Space. It's been used in the original Star Trek series. It's that, or Doctor Who, right? You just have this, or maybe not Lost in Space. I'm probably thinking of Doctor Who. You just have this crazy sound, which I think is just very unique, and you just notice it. I don't know that we've heard it in Star Wars before. So I think that part of it makes it really unique. I think there was also another musical cue that I picked up in here. That's another homage to Pirates of the Caribbean. It really sounded like Klaus Badelt's, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, one of his scores with when Keira Knightley's character is getting chased after all of the Black Pearl's crew turned to skeletons,
Mm-hmm.
and that thumping of the drums and the music, like you hear that thing when Jod's in the droid room. Is it the droid room, or is it maybe, I forgot where it was, but anyway, you start to hear those drums and that sound, and it was very Pirates of the Caribbean. So there's musical cues sprinkled throughout all of this that are really doing that and eliciting a lot of that callback, I think, that we're having, that you can't always put it in the moment, but whenever you really start to try to analyze it, and then especially if someone else kind of points it out to you, you're like, that's exactly what that is. And I can't have to believe that it's all intentional in that way.
Yeah.
And so we're getting a few cues like that I think bring those memories to light and kind of activate that subconscious thing that you're probably experiencing in overdrive with this show, with all of we had a question about Easter eggs. We just need to have a top 10 show with all your Easter eggs for this show. I guess that's probably going to be a Patreon show after this thing is done.
Yeah, let's do it. Sure.
Yeah, top 100 Easter eggs from Skeleton Crew, and that's probably still not enough time. But so I think some of that stuff is really what's creeping in, and they've just layered it so well through all this. And I got to be honest, Mick Giacchino, like his work in this is actually really good. There's a great mix of Star Wars-y type of music to it, and the difference in the vibes between the different places that they go is really doing well, and it just fits so well with whatever the characters are doing on screen, no matter if we're on At Attin, or if we're in the Pirate Cove, or if we're in this other asteroid where Archimedes lives. I'm sorry, I'm going to call her Archimedes because it reminds me of Sword in the Stone. But proof and point, right? It just there's always something that reminds you of something. You're just getting that headspace every single time.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about that, but similar to what we're seeing with all the Easter eggs on screen, yeah, there's all kinds of little nods to other instrumental pieces from other works. A lot of the ones that you just mentioned. So that's a great point. Before we get into the breakdown, just want to go to some of the chats. People are chiming in with their kind of initial thoughts. One Up versus CPU says this episode was one that got me fully on board with this show. That's good to know. There was another one here. Rita Reborn said, love this direction. Was worried they drag out that he's not really a Jedi plot, but they delivered that nicely right away. So.
That's a great point. And that was Rita Reborn did a great job of saying this much more eloquently than I did. That's part of what I was saying about we're answering questions with more questions, but we're just giving us enough that says, okay, I feel comfortable enough with the answer I have right now. It'll continue to maybe evolve and shape, but we've got enough of an answer right now for some of these other things that we don't feel like we're dragging them out unnecessarily. So
yeah,
a great point there, Rita Reborn.
I'll just go to two more real quick. Michael Draco says, I'm torn between Jod was a Jedi and went into hiding and stumbled into being a pirate while hiding his true identity. And he's a Force-sensitive scoundrel just playing into the kids' ideas. We're going to get to that. There's one of the questions that we have that was submitted that's specifically on that topic. So we'll talk about that here in a little bit. And then Alex came in and said, I like the last Starfighter moment when with Wim in the turret, the character was genuinely happy to blast some goons. That word goons being used to talk about the New Republic was kind of sweet. Okay. All right, let's get into it. We open up on At Attin, and it's again another one scene. Last episode we had just one quick scene with At Attin, and we were done. We didn't go back, and the same thing happens here. A very important scene. Before we get into like the nitty gritty, I just want to say that we actually got a wider shot of that room with the mural on there, and I think we were saying that there was a part of it that looks like it was covered up by the staircase. And when you pull back now, it's not. So it literally is. That's the doorway there. So it really is just that Jedi and that outstretched arm. There's nothing else to the left of that. So I don't know that we'll get an explanation for that. I'm sure at some point we will. I mean, it seems to be a heavy focus in this episode at the beginning.
Yeah, and when we get to the Jewels of the Old Republic, and I know we're going to talk about this Sunday as well, but we're going to have to get some screenshots and share those up on screen because there's some consistencies between the mural and what we see in Kim's workshop there, in Kim's observatory. So there's definitely some linkages there too. Yeah,
we'll break into that. And that's what I'm saying. Like that could be that's an entire show in itself. So we won't have the time to get into that tonight on this one. So, but yeah, we open up and, the security droid's sitting there saying, look, absolutely, there's nothing that we can do. Right after hours on Attin, we hear that if you do anything like that, you could be, I don't know, in trouble, I guess. I forget the word that was used there. I want to back up though. The patrolling droids at the very beginning. I want to talk about that just because it feels
how empty the whole city was.
Yeah, and eerie it was. And there was only one droid they showed in the city that was walking. And I was like, okay, is that the droid that was heading over to Farah's house? Or was that just some like one lonely droid that patrols the city? The next scene we get is in the suburbs themselves. And we see that one droid kind of walking up the hill, heading to what looks like their house. Again, maybe that is a droid that walked in. It could be the same droid, but the idea that city is like almost complete lockdown, right? It's weird. Like there's almost a curfew that has to happen and no one's allowed to kind of be out on the streets at that point.
So is that how you're interpreting it? You're interpreting like they've shut the city down because this event has happened?
No. I think that's just norm. Like my takeaway was like, that's just every day after 8 p.m. everything shuts down because I mean, what else do you do? It doesn't seem like there's a nightlife, right? People don't seem like they have free agency just to go out and do whatever they want. I mean, they're on guardrail or rails whenever they go to work and everything's very structured. They're constantly being monitored. I just don't think they don't have any kind of leisure activity, which is why people like Fern and Wim are so eager and desperate to do something, right? Don't you want to have adventure? Don't you want to have fun kind of thing, that to quote him directly? I think that's just the norm, but I don't know. I can see what you're saying though. Maybe that is just now that there's been an event, they are in lockdown of sorts. But what was your take on it?
Well, I mean, Neil's house has the St. Pauli girl in there in the garage, so they know how to have fun at least, right?
Right. So, yeah. I guess they drink somewhere.
Right. Yeah. In their own home, I guess. But I wasn't sure what to make of it because you could view it as it's just kind of after hours or maybe before hours. But I mean, probably more after hours. But you could also think, okay, we had this seismic event and now we have reports that people have breached the wall, or breached the barrier, which is illegal and not allowed to happen. And now we've got to, like, we're in damage control mode with the supervisor. And you were absolutely right in the previous show, the supervisor, capitalized S, singular, there seems to be an individual that is their leader, so to speak. So you can kind of view it either way, and I'm curious maybe what some of the folks in the chat think here. We might throw a couple of those up if people answer if you think this is one or the other. I don't really know what to make of it though. I think they made a point of showing the abandoned aspect of it all.
Yeah,
and it makes me feel like this was intentional, that they, that they have actually instigated, like you had, or instituted, like you had said, more of a curfew type of thing going on. If you go to from work and after a certain hour, all doors are closed. And you can congregate maybe in your neighborhoods, but you can't really do much else.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of on board with that one right now. But again, difficult to tell because they didn't really give us any dialogue in response to that.
And they might have a cantina. It just closes like at 8 p.m., right? They're not open till, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. in the morning. So that way they can drink their St. Pauli Girl beer.
That's right.
Okay, so the parents are kind of having this parent conference, and they're all, of course, freaked out. I think it's one of KB's mothers, though, that says something that's very interesting. She says, we lost a signal to KB's life monitor. And then later on, she says she has urgent medical needs. Now, they wouldn't put that in there if we weren't going to find out what that is. And I don't know how much the kids know that either. Like that could be an instance later, episode, let's just call it 4, or episode 5, where suddenly she's not doing so well. And so it's no longer just a matter of like, hey, we got to get home because we miss home, and I got to get home because we need the treasure. But if they've got KB who's suffering, dying, she's got some medication or whatever, I don't know, some special illness or whatever, that could take them on another adventure to go get her fixed up or healed or whatever else, or it could just expedite or signify more importance on why they have to get home because of whatever that is. But it's very interesting. That's another dynamic, another level to that character. We talked about this. We didn't really see a whole lot of her and get to know her much in that first episode, 2 episodes, but we felt like, hey, her time will come, and it's certainly starting to kind of boil up here.
Yeah, really even still not anything. But it was nice to get something about KB. And like Mike said in the chat, yeah, the life monitor seems like that is either the visor itself, or at least the apparatus that goes on her head and behind it is probably built into that, or that is it. And maybe the visor is an enhancement that she's made or something on top of it all. But again, I think we're still dramatically missing something about KB, right? There's something unique and special to this character of why they're kind of singling her out by exclusion of the backstory. And this was nice to get something in there that goes on to it. I'm not sure how excited I am about having a medical problem, because it does seem like it's telegraphing exactly what you just said. Like, we're going to have something where at some point she's going to start feeling sick. Mm-hmm. It's going to change the scope of the mission a little bit. We're going to change it. It seems pretty prescriptive in that way. But, as long as they do it well, it could still work. But it was nice to have some depth to KB finally, where we had been woefully missing that compared to all of the other characters. Even though we don't know a ton about like a Neil character, we at least know something. We've seen the family life, so we feel like we know the character better. And with the others, we have that too, except for KB. So I'm excited to get something here. Yeah.
Well, we'll see. We'll see when that pops up, but I guarantee that will come up a little bit later.
Absolutely.
And that droid, a safety droid, has been sent by the supervisor. Allegedly, could be from his office, but he's there on behalf of the supervisor. Says that the kids are on a ship that's illegally exited the barrier. They don't want to risk the contact with the Republic. And then he goes on to say, while everybody's arguing that violations will result in security action. And I thought, like Wendell's wife? Is that what happened there again? Just to stoke up some controversy and conspiracy theories. And then Farrah says that she wants to petition for an immediate audience with the supervisor. So a lot to unpack there. But I think the first one that really kind of piqued my interest was they don't want to run the risk of contacting the Republic. So this opens up a lot of questions, and it's kind of carryover from our Patreon episode, but whether or not the people of At Attin actually know what's going on. I think Utini's got a question in here a little bit later, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I guess when you hear that, did that change anything as far as your opinion coming out of that Patreon show and like what's really happening there on At Attin?
I think it pretty much confirmed that they definitely do not have any kind of outside touch point to the outside galaxy, right? Yeah. Anything outside this planet, they have no idea what's going on. And then we get confirmation later. Or it's
controlled. Sorry. Or it could be controlled too, because remember I hate to bring up the holiday special.
Oh boy.
But that is kind of one of those holes that in there where it's like, okay, well, how did they get that? Unless that predates the old Republic, which, I mean, maybe it could, but that's a great quality for, thousands of years old. But anyways, go on. Sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some gaps here that you could start to punch holes in, but I think it's pretty clear though. I mean, they don't have anything out. And then we learn later on in the episode that of course the planet is intentionally hidden, right? And it has
Mhm.
been this way for a very long time, and that has been the way of life and the culture and the directive for some reason.
Yeah.
And so I think it just, all of those things we learned in this episode, we talk about the things that we should just kind of believe. I think the motivation behind all that is the interesting aspect of it. But I think we have a lot of truth to this, that the normal people, maybe the supervisor is an exclusion, and maybe there might be some others in that small circle that might know what else is going on in the galaxy, but almost a guarantee, it seems like no one in this room, none of these parents seem to. We thought maybe Farah might have an idea of what was going on. And I think you've speculated before too, Wendell, Wim's father, seems to be digging in later episodes, finding something and maybe starting to dig up the dirt as to what's actually happening. And so a lot of those things seem to be falling into place here, where the parents are going to go on this mission to figure out what is going on. And Wendell clearly looks very distressed, right? He's very disconnected from the conversation. And when the droid tells him all of this, you can just see in his face, like, oh, hell no. Like, this is not acceptable, right? And so I think we're going to see that all of the things that we've seen kind of in the trailers are all starting to fall into place a little bit for us here of kind of what the show's kind of telegraphing, right? There's nothing really surprising going on at this point, but it's being executed pretty well. So it's kind of moving in the right direction here. But I don't think there's any way that these people know what's going on outside this planet.
Yeah, we'll get into that more here a little bit with Utini's question, but I would agree that it does feel like there is a fire that has been ignited within Wendell. It seems like he's disconnected from the other conversation. He really doesn't say a whole lot either, right? And it almost feels like he's thinking, he's plotting, he's trying to put a plan together. Like, okay, this is not going to go the way I'm going to get back my son, right?
You
Quote Mel Gibson.
You brought up Wim's mom, right? So maybe this is rekindling memories of whatever happened there too, right? So,
right, yeah,
and maybe that's why we have this sensory kind of deprivation going on. Was very intentional in the episode, and you could see why why they would do that directorially, right? And mask kind of his interactivity and paying attention to what's going on until he hears somebody's like he understands or kind of recognizes, and then kind of goes back into that mode. And if this is something with his wife that's happened before, you can understand that he's not going to allow it to repeat itself with his son.
Yeah. Draco says part of the great work is to stay in the barrier. It's very authoritarian. Absolutely agree. One Up versus CPU says there's a scene in which they were talking about At Attin, and they show that one of the kids playing around with money. So I think the Old Republic stashed all their credits there and close it off. Yes, that was one of the theories I think we threw out during the Patreon show. And on that same note, M. Robin says maybe it was a Republic bank planet. Maybe there's a Republic vault there as well.
There's your planet of eternal treasure, right?
Yeah, it would be in a planet of eternal treasure. But yeah, that's another theory that we threw out there. And we've talked about this, whether or not the treasure is like a physical treasure, like gold or some kind of rare resource, or is it more like, hey, they live in the perfect society where no one wants to do anything, and that's being... I don't know. We'll get into that more in a little bit, but love the comments. Keep them coming. If you guys got questions, throw them in there as well. But that's it. We're done with At Attin. We go back to the Borgo starport, and they get away. Let's just kind of cut to the chase. We knew they would get out of there. Jod uses the Force to distract, which already I was like, okay. I think you and I both went in saying, okay, he's Force sensitive. We didn't think it was trickery, mirrors or string or whatever the other stuff that Fern rattles off a little bit later.
Right.
But he does say something that's very interesting. He says, I waited and the Force provided, right? Talking about his opportunity for the kids. And so there's another question that we'll get into a little bit later, but there are things that he's doing, things that he's saying that make me think, okay, I'm not ready to say that he's a Jedi or even that he was a Padawan. But if he had a relationship with somebody or knew somebody, he just seems more spiritual than just the average person that is Force sensitive and never had any training, never got any kind of knowledge about it. Because you got to remember, if he did grow up and he was not a Padawan, access to the Jedi philosophy and their teachings and principles, that was not readily available. You couldn't just go to the library and pick something up, especially during the Galactic Empire era, right? So he speaks almost with kind of a reverence to the Force. And so I do think that maybe there is something there about his background that is adjacent to the Jedi in some way, maybe a relationship, maybe he was a Padawan. That's probably feasible at this point. But there is something about the way he speaks about the Force that was very interesting that I picked up on during this episode.
Yeah, especially when they were kind of giving each other a hard time about, he feels the Force, or Wim's, of course, all in.
Right.
And he's like, and Jod pulls everyone aside, like, oh, there's somebody coming. And Wim's like, that's evidence that he feels the Force. And then KB does it. And she goes, well, Fern, of course, with the smart aleck attitude, saying that, well, KB must have the Force too. And I laughed out loud. Jod's response was, the Force flows through us all. But
Right.
exactly to your point, right?
Right.
There's almost this philosophical aspect to some of the things he says that you're like, okay, clearly he's a bit of a smooth talker. We know this, right? He's been a captain. He's a pirate. He's had to survive for, even if we say he was once a Jedi, it's been almost 30 years, right? Or around 30 years since the fall of the Republic, or of the Galactic Republic.
Mhm.
And so it's been a while, but he would retain some of the stuff. But he is a smooth talker. He does know how to manipulate people. He does know how to play this angle up, right? He is putting on a show for whim. So I think there's a certain hesitation I have about how far we take that. But
Yeah.
I'm with you. There does feel like there is something. There are more layers there, and we're already seeing this with the character in general, right? That he's not a bad guy. It's kind of that heart of gold, but he's just trying to make his way through the galaxy, like so many other people that we've come across in the franchise. And so I like that aspect of it, that we see that pretty front and center, and he's definitely out for himself, but he can still throw these moments out there that give us a little thing to ponder briefly.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, and again, it's another question that we've got. So we'll talk about that here in more detail. But yeah, I mean, the kids seem to be enamored. Like Wim is very enamored by him, of course, because he thinks he's a Jedi. He goes, Jedi are the defenders of the justice and keepers of peace in the galaxy, when he's almost defending him. He does that little introduction with both him and the kids, and only Wim and Neil are actually say hello, right? When he tries to introduce himself, which is good, because the girls got their defenses up, which is, I love that fact about them. And then KB senses the patrolling droid. And I had the question, if you're like, wait a second, are they trying to say that she's Force sensitive, or is that coincidence? It's not on the nose. It's subtle. It's very subtle. So it's probably me overthinking things, but I don't know. Do you want to go down that rabbit hole now?
Well, so, a Music Train actually gave us a question right after the show last week. And his question was, how many of the kids will be Force sensitive? So it was almost like a Music Train has the Force, right? Because he knew something was, of course, he knows that. He knows we usually talk about this kind of stuff too, right?
Right.
But, and then you have this thing with KB, and, it's hard to say no at this point, like who's going to have something resembling the Force and who won't, Yeah. And there's a certain element of me that's like, that's interesting to explore a young kid with the Force, with an adult character who can use the Force, but his checkered past and the history is a little uncertain. So there's a certain interesting element to that that's a little more dynamic than a typical Jedi relationship that we've typically seen on screen, with especially in this era with Obi-Wan and Luke, and even Sabine and Ahsoka, and so on and so forth. So this would be kind of an interesting spin on that, but also with KB's cybernetic implants, or whatever the medical device might be, she might have a certain, like, she can sense, or maybe magnetic signatures or other things like that, kind of frequencies and things like that might resonate with her, and she's able to, quote unquote, hear them as well, and be able to sense them. So there could be a practical reason, I guess, is what I'm saying as well. Yeah. But I am slightly intrigued about the idea of KB and Jod having some connection in this way. If that were to pan out, I wouldn't be against it. Although the rest of the kids, I don't think there's any chance.
No, I think if it's anybody, I would agree it's probably going to be her. But I'm not ready to go down that path just yet. But it was interesting that they threw that in there, and it's like, wonder if there's something there. Okay, they get onto the ship, and there's a great moment there where Neil sees the blaster after Jod leaves it, and his eyes are like massively huge, like, holy crap, it's a weapon kind of thing. I know you were giggling about it as well, because it's just one of those kid moments.
There's so many just clever moments that are just wonderful. Yeah. Neil has the gun. He's like holding it and looking at it, like he said, really big, and then drops it. And he like throws his hands up, and he puts his hands in his lap, and his fingers are still all extended, like he's done something wrong and he's not sure what to do. And it's sitting next to him. And this happens again on the Onyx Cinder a little bit too. And this is on the transport ferry going out to the ship, and absolutely perfect. It's not the focus of the conversation because there's dialogue going on, but when you see it, you just love it. I mean, it's just so perfect. And there's so many moments in this series so far that have those kind of background moments happening, and just actions, that physical acting that you've talked a lot about over time.
Yeah.
That really sell moments like this and really feel good. And actually, one of the things I loved about this is they come up to, this is right up you and Lauren's alley. When they come up to the Onyx Cinder, what does it look like to you?
When they come up to the Onyx Cinder. Oh.
So when they come up and Jod's asking about the ship, and you're like, well, what are you flying? And he's like looking around, and then he sees it come into view. What does it remind you of?
The Gaze Electric?
No, it reminded me of Pigpen from Peanuts. with all the dust
Oh,
around
the
it.
dust. Sorry, you were talking. You were like, I was still in Star Wars land, and you're going back to Peanuts. Yes, with all the smoke around it, and it looked like it was about to just burn down. Right? Yeah.
Yeah, it reminded me of Pigpen. Like you and Lauren were talking about this on the holiday show this past week.
Yeah.
Of your love for Peanuts, and this was definitely a Pigpen Peanuts moment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, which is great because it gives that ship a lot of character, which I think we're going to continue to get more of here. So going back to, I guess, the episode here, they get into that whole exchange about, he says, he's got a friend with lost maps and stuff. And I thought, oh my God, Maz Kanata is going to show up. I don't want to, I'm tuning out at this point.
Man, I was getting so excited.
I did not. I know I could already feel the amount of people from Patreon coming at me, bro. So
there were a few of us, like in Discord, we talked about it. Mike and I talked about it a little bit too. And I was like, man, I thought it was going to happen.
Thank you, John Watts, Chris Ford, appreciate it. But there's so Jod's we get the exchange that we got in one of the clips that was released where they're questioning whether or not he's a Jedi, and he's like, that's not a Jedi, that's not something that a Jedi would say. Then it's Wim says, I think it's Wim that says you can do anything. Like, I mean, again, he just looks up to Jedi and to him specifically as this godly being, right? Because of all the stories and books that he's read or whatever. But he says, you're a Jedi, right? And he says, of course. Which, that again, I like the fact that you said it earlier. They didn't really tease this out any longer than it needed to be. We got some answers really quick about whether he is or isn't. That pulled that Band-Aid right off. So good. We'll get that to that here a little bit later. And then Fern says we should blast off before he gets back after he heads in. So, you still got the girls not really trusting him. They're wanting to go. And the guys are like, no, we've got to trust him. But he's going back now to get SM-33. Yeah.
And KB says, look, we're just kids, though. I mean, KB's even more practical about this. And this goes back to Fern wanting to speak for KB a lot. And it was nice to see KB speak up for herself and be that voice of reason, like we talked about in episode 1 of, look, we can't really do this on our own. Like we've been lucky to kind of survive this long. And now we have somebody who's at least reasonably capable of helping us navigate and figure something out. Let's not blow that away and completely ditch this right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I think she says he's gotten us this far when she's talking to Kim a little bit.
Right.
There's a quick confirmation that Captain Silva has escaped. We hear that. It's like, oh, okay. Again, we got that answer. Check. We're done. We're moving on past that. So very satisfying considering some of the other stuff that we've gotten in Star Wars before. And then he goes into this droid repair area, which was great. I mean, we got the CZ droid, which was funny because we just talked about a CZ droid on the holiday special that we just did, breaking down in Old Hope. I swear that voice is the Urkel voice. Like, if you listen to it, it sounds like he's doing the Urkel voice for that CZ D2 9000 droid, but I could be wrong.
Did Jaleel White voice the droid?
No, it's not in the credits.
Okay,
but
I didn't see who did it.
They've done this before though, with little like bits like that. They won't put them in the credits, but you'll hear about it later on from some interview or whatever else. But my goodness, that droid sounds like Urkel. Play it back. I may be wrong. I may be crazy, but
I think the other droid that was like looking for the princess, I think might be a callback to like the Droids cartoon or something like that. I was trying to figure out where this is from. But I think there was another one in the comic books that it may have resembled this too. But who knows what these guys were thinking? Yeah, like all the Easter eggs at the show were absolutely ridiculous.
And then the B1 waking up and going, "Did we win?" And which I think that's Matt. What's his face? Matt Wood or Matthew?
Yeah, it's Matthew Wood, and that's actually straight out of was it Rebels?
Did we have I think you're right. We had a droid that asked the same question at some point like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the other, I think, animated series. I think. Oh no, it was Bad Batch. It was in Bad Batch where he asked, "Did we win?"
Exactly. Oh, it was when they turned the head on or something. I forget.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it was part of Bad Batch though.
Okay. He finds SM-33 and sure enough verifies that it's him because of all the attitude. Throws him on that hover cart, and then we get Benjar Pranik who shows up, which is played by Alfred Molina. God, that guy is good at everying. I mean, he's just doing a voiceover, but my goodness, it's like, the best voiceover we've had in Star Wars in a long time. Nothing, not to take anything away from the Bad Batch and D. Bradley Breaker and everybody else there. But he has, they're having an exchange, and really this is just a conversation. I assume that we're going to see this character a little bit later, given that it's Alfred Molina voicing him, and they had this really long exchange. We don't understand. We don't really get to know what happened. We know Jod escaped some way, But there was that one quote in there where he says, always a fire in your belly and a mad scheme in your heart, which is nice that he said that because it gives us some more insight into Jod's character, what he thinks, how he thinks, that kind of thing. But with you want to add anything to this conversation? It was really just a way to kind of say, look, I know, it almost felt like he was playing Jod to try to get some information. Like, hey, you shouldn't be out here. I'm going to go ahead and go along with your story, but we're going to call at the very end. He says, why don't we call the guards out here just to verify, make sure everything's legit.
Yeah, I like that there was a certain element of loyalty to him, but also loyalty to the current captain, right? And still doing, quote unquote, the right thing of where your loyalties are supposed to lie, even though you might like somebody. There are some characters like that, but I really like this character. I thought the exchange was really good. And what's really interesting, though, is we kind of skip from that all the way to basically Jod, being, fired at, like coming back out to the ship and the ferry. So we kind of jumped and skipped all the rest of this stuff that happened, which was really interesting. And actually, I was a little bit thankful we didn't drag this out anymore. Of like, how did he get through everything else while the rest of the station or the rest of the, the port is looking for him, and he somehow gets out and actually gets a ferry with this big droid that he's struggling to push. I'm glad we didn't belabor that because I don't know that I could have done that for 10 minutes or something like that.
If the kids ask him in episode 4, so how did you get SM-33? Would you want him just to kind of give a quick explanation, or do you want to see a flashback? And I know that's kind of silly because I don't think we'd do that, but
no, I don't want him to answer at all. I got you your droid. Why do you care?
Okay. All right.
Because why would he respond? I think from a character perspective, it'd be like, I used my magic.
Posturing, trying to make himself, trust. I don't know. It's just an interest. I was just curious about if they would do it, because you're right. It does just cut, and you're like, oh, he got away with this massive droid, and he's being chased, right? So didn't get away scot-free, but
it kind of tells me the footage if they shot anything, the footage probably just didn't work, or
they're like, really, cut it, just cut it.
It was just really slow and drag things down. They just like, you know what? Let's just jump right to it. He knows this place in and out. Probably, let's just give him the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. Right. He jumps on the ship. They try to get away, and they're stuck by the fuel lines. This is where I felt like this when I said they don't take themselves very seriously. That line, if it's a very well made fuel line, like, it's almost, it's perfect, right? It speaks to.
It's like traditional Star Wars comedy, right?
Yeah. Right. Because you wouldn't expect fuel lines.
Call back to Force Awakens, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true too. Brutus orders the cannon to be armed, and they blast off into hyperspace right before it gets shot, or before the ship gets shot. And then Brutus stands there as this damage is all kind of coming down around him, and then orders a bounty to be placed on their head. So that was cool, because I think that opens up a lot of possibilities for bounty hunters now to enter into the series as well.
I didn't understand that though. Like, why would pirates? I think I said this on the Patreon show. Why would pirates hire bounty hunters? Why not just do it themselves? Like, wouldn't they be worried about the risk of them learning about At Attin as well? I mean, bounty hunters have a guild and they have a certain code, so to speak, although some like Dash don't really care about that. So why would they hire bounty hunters? And I was like, okay, maybe I rewatched. I was like, maybe the port is so damaged that they can't do it, and they don't have their ships now, and they've got to put a bounty out because they need help. But Gunter was like saying, or Gunther or whatever his name is, Jaleel White's character was like, you want me to go after him, Captain? He's like, no, let's hire somebody else to do it. That part didn't make any sense to me. So I'm curious to see where this goes, of why they would make that decision, because pirates typically just handle this kind of stuff themselves. I
think it might be both. I don't think they were abandoning it. And I say that knowing that, based on some of the TV spots and the trailers we've seen already, we know that we're still going to see them being chased by Gunter and some of the other ones. So I don't think they've abandoned the idea, but okay. Hey, if they can hire some more people, some more hands, and have a more effective approach to bringing them back in, then probably. So
yeah, and Michael in the chat was saying that they didn't say to hire bounty hunters; they just put a bounty on his head. Absolutely true. But then I think in some of I was kind of referencing the teasers though too, where they say we got a bunch of murderous bounty hunters coming after us, which has been kind of back and forth between that and pirates. So
yeah.
Maybe it really is both though. Maybe
it could be. Yeah, I would imagine it's probably going to be both at this point. All right, so SM-33 gets powered back on. They tell 33 that Jod's a Jedi and that he can find At Attin. Neil's belly growls. I don't know if you caught that at one point, because he's hungry, and so they decide they're going to start eating. That leaves Jod to kind of wander around the ship looking for clothes. I think he looks at a cloak, looks at some kind of a jacket, looks at some boots. and then pulls the sword out, which I thought was cool because, hey, once usually characters take that, it shows up later down the road and, saves their lives or whatever else. So nice. But I did appreciate that we had this grown up moment where we had SM-33 show up and was like really sizing Jod up to be like, hey, what do you think you're doing on this ship kind of thing, right? And the whole exchange was very interesting, especially when 33 gets full size just to kind of look down on him, right? To kind of posture himself that way. But that whole takeaway of like, hey, these kids are they really from At Attin? He kept saying I. Now, 2 times before he said he didn't know what At Attin was. I almost took this as though maybe he's not being completely honest at 33. Does he really know that these kids are from At Attin and he knows what At Attin is? I think we had talked about the reason why he wouldn't know is because that name back during the Old Republic was not At Attin. It was changed later down the road. But if he does know, that really kind of changes things. And why would 33 be keeping this secret?
I didn't take that he knew. He just said that the kids were from somewhere. That's all that he knew. He didn't know what to believe. Because again, he doesn't know what At Attin is. And he was just telling him he was watching out for him. And then he had the whole eye and then creeping around the corner was going to come another comical moment of saying,
yeah.
So I think it just viewed it as that of, he's just, like you said, sizing him up and then not really giving him any information and just basically only acknowledge that they were kids and they have an origin from somewhere that he doesn't necessarily know either, but he'll defend his captain, right, and his crew.
Yeah. Let's see. One up says, think Jod had some Joppa stew in the pot. And my Star Wars guys, Rob says, how old is that food on the ship?
That was one of my questions too. Like, where'd that come from and how old is it?
It's probably super old, but
but nutrient packed.
Yeah. It's got a shelf life of like 1,000 years, hopefully.
And it's still expired or it's still not expired.
And then we get the conversation. I think somebody brought it up a little bit earlier where the kids are kind of talking about the treasure. They're talking about whether or not there's really treasure there. Wim's like, no way, that town's boring. There's no way there'd be treasure on that place. Then Neil kind of just steps in. He's like, maybe it has something to do with the great work. And I'm like, here we go. My boy Neil is giving us some answers, dropping a lot of truth bombs on us. Yeah. He talks about how, what do our parents do? And they all agree that they all analyze. And he's like, analyze what? Like, what is it that we're actually analyzing? So, something boring, something about money. So it does feel like they're kind of leading us into this direction of there's something valuable, like currency wise, about At Attin. How the computations and all that play into it, I don't really get just yet, unless it's truly financial math, which I think is going to be a huge letdown for me, honestly. But I think it makes sense that could be the case.
So I did some research on some of the stuff on the last one, and like the factor of 5, was it factor of 5 or whatever it was?
Yeah, whatever that was. Yeah,
it's actually a financial term, and it's actually a real financial term. Yeah, and I'm not going to pretend to understand anything about it, but it's actually a financial term.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all roads leading to some kind of financial background. And
I believe that number is even real, that he did like 1.604, whatever. I think that's actually a real number too. So
yeah,
we have to up our game on the research front. We thought this was just made up Star Wars gibberish, but apparently maybe not. So
yeah, I still have like PTSD from Plagueis and some of the financial stuff that was being covered in that book, but
in the novel,
yeah. Interesting though, Wim does cover up his credits when Jod comes back in, so like he almost feels like he's not sure whether to trust Jod, and that really maybe he is after just their money. But it was funny how he covered up his bowl, and then Neil does the same thing. It's in the audio descriptions.
Jod hasn't seen the credits yet.
That's true.
I think is the other part of it.
That's
too,
a good point. Yeah, he's not seen that they actually have them.
Love that Neil flips his bowl over too, and there's nothing in front of him.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Not suspicious at all.
Maybe he was just trying to say like we're done eating kind of thing. But we get the next moment here where Fern says, "But I'm not even tired," and then it cuts over to her snoring. Great kid moment. The kids are sleeping. Neil is snoring.
Neil's snoring through his elephant trunk, so you get a little elephant sound.
You can hear that elephant sound in there, which is great. And then KB is awake and she's just staring down Jod. And she says, it's unlikely you're telling the truth about the Jedi. I calculated the odds. Now, we talked about what her visor does. It seems like that maybe there's something medicinal about it. I don't know if that's the right word, right? Maybe it's helping her through whatever kind of illness or sickness she has. But I think we had also speculated that maybe this thing just allows her to do computation similar to like Lobot in a lot of ways. And it has an additional little visor that comes over and she can see things or has different perspectives as well. But it is interesting that she was trying to calculate whether or not he could be a Jedi. And he tells her sometimes you just have to trust your gut and whether or not to trust him. This comes up later because Kim calls him out and says, did he directly to Fern, did he tell you to trust your gut? So that says that either, she knows Jod pretty well, but it does sound like that is a line he's used many, many times, either through the course of trying to deceive people, social engineer people, whatever it is he's doing. So it certainly continues to plant more doubt, especially later on when he says that, or she says that to him, when Kim says that to KB. Sorry.
Right.
Then he uses the Force again to turn off the cabin lights. So again, another nice little cantrip is what I'd probably call it, rather than like a full-on Force power type thing.
Yeah, but again, he's done it enough times now. I think we could pretty much put that to bed. He's actually using the Force.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, they land away from the observatory, which is Kim's observatory. They don't know that just yet. And they have another great moment where Jod's like, "What are you doing?" Like, and Wim comes out. He's riding the crane with Neil. They're just horsing around, jacking around.
He says, "Yeah, we're playing."
I mean, yeah, we're playing. Right, which is perfect. He's like, "What are you doing?" We're playing. Yeah. He's like, "Come on, dude, you're on a cargo lift. What are you doing?" Yeah, that's so kids, right? They're trying to get back. Their lives are at stake here, but there's always a moment to have fun as a child, which is beautiful. I love that scene with them walking. I mean, it's just iconic now, right? With them walking like that. I mean, it's very Stand By Me. The poster, one of the posters for Stand By Me. There's just that whole silhouette piece. There's a lot of things in Star Wars where we get those silhouette characters like that, but that was really special. I love the way that gas giant, and that was a good use of the volume. I assume that's the volume, just how bright and vibrant that was, but it was a perfect use of the volume there.
I'm mixed on this one with the volume because it's the state. Like I agree, the video part of it or the background of it, the planet, it was actually a gorgeous planet too. Like the design and how they used all the swirls and everything was absolutely gorgeous. That part I didn't have a problem with. It was the set that I had a problem with. The set didn't look very natural with all the sand. Like the dunes felt very artificial. It felt like Obi-Wan Kenobi. More in that line of like some of those scenes with the sand, of course, towards the end of the show with and with the confrontation with Vader and with Reva. And so that was part of my issue there, was that it was clearly the volume, which I think was fine. And the volume itself wasn't the limitation this time. It was kind of the set. And maybe this is what the challenge that we're having with this is, that you can just tell when you're in that environment. And sometimes maybe it's not the volume that's the issue. It's just everything else just doesn't feel quite right with the volume in that way. So I'm not saying it looked bad by any stretch. It still worked, but I think for me, it took me out of it for this sequence when they're outside, because it just didn't feel quite right. It just didn't jive like totally well for me, but it didn't ruin the scene though either, just to be clear. I'm not trying to harp on it too much, but I could definitely tell, and it took me out, and maybe I just noticed some of these things more so than maybe most people would though.
Yeah. I don't even know that I noticed that. You say it now, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. But as I was watching it, I think I was just still kind of raptured by the first shot, which was the silhouette and the gas giant there in the background.
The design on that planet was really amazing though.
It was pretty cool. Jod tells him that he doesn't trust his friend, not 100%, that she could stab them in the back, and that freaks out Neil. He's like, no, not literally.
I love it. Yeah.
Again, great kid moment there. And they finally walk up to that. We get a quick scene where Kim's kind of calling in the New Republic to arrest him. So she's already calling the cops on him. He knocks on the door. Do
you think they heard the bounty? Do you think they got the bounty as well? And that's how they kind of knew who it was? Because they seem to maybe have an idea of who Crimson, maybe if she referred to him as Crimson Jack on the call. Do you think they knew who that was? Or do you think they've seen this bounty that may have been put out there by the pirates?
If it wasn't, if it wasn't the bounty, I think that's plausible. But if it wasn't, then it might just be the next line that the line he gives her when he's at the door. He says, I know I left things in such a mess between us, but I couldn't show my face again until I brought you something really special. Who knows? Maybe, he wasn't allowed to come back there, and she threatened that if he ever did, she would call the cops, kind of thing. That they had a relationship is also kind of weird, just while we're on that topic. But again, that's just, that's Star Wars.
It's just like Maz. You can't take it seriously until you do.
Yeah. I mean, if Lando and L-33, I mean, that's, what else? What's left at that point? But
It works.
Yeah, it can work. Yeah, nice quote of the line there. But yeah, so Jod knocks. We get the reference to Crimson Jack, which I only knew, honestly. I posted this. I knew from the Star Wars comic, which this is why I wore this shirt today, because in the 70s and part of the early 80s, that's really all we had as far as like comic books, and as corny as it may be, but we loved it, right? I didn't even know that they had done a canon version of this character Crimson Jack from the Halcyon comic, which I didn't even read, honestly. And yeah, did you read that? What was that? What was the character doing in that? Do you know?
No, I did not read that series.
Okay,
I kind of refused to because it was too much of a
marketing ploy
with Star Wars hotel stuff, whatever was going on over there.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, that's cool that they brought it into canon. I was excited for the original comic, just throwing that out there. But anyways,
what's funny with the Crimson Jack, because that came like issue 7 or something like that.
It was early on, yeah,
really early on. And then when they redid when the movies came out, they of course did the Han Solo stuff with Jabba the Hutt, and I think it kind of retconned the comic, and so they had to bring Crimson Jack in later on in the comics. I don't know. I think it was like in the issue, like the 30-something issues or something like that, and to kind of retcon what exactly happened to make it all make sense again. So it's actually kind of an interesting story to go out there and just you go out there and look up Crimson Jack, and you'll kind of see, and you'll get some of that flavor of what happened, and then how the movie kind of changed things, and they went back and fixed it, I guess, in the comic book too, which is pretty typical for comic books sometimes, especially of that age.
Yeah. I posted this on social media today. God, I post a lot of stuff today on social media, but I posted today that in episode 1, we kind of went into that episode. Let me just say it a different way. We've gotten 3 different names from now, and we've had 3 episodes. Would you like to see this? Like every episode, someone recognizes them and we get a different name, just because I think that's plausible at this point, honestly. And I think it fits his character, knowing what we know.
Yeah, I think it's perfect for the character. I'm with you. Does it need to be all 8 episodes? We get 8 different
maybe
names?
Not all 8.
Maybe not. But I like this, though, to where if we're at the end of the show and we've got 4, 5, 6 names for him, I think that's absolutely perfect. And that's everything that kind of told us early on of, look, this character is many names to many people.
Right.
And it just goes to whether you can believe or trust him, which version is the real person. Like, what's his real name? Who is that person behind all of these personas, I guess.
Right. They go into the observatory. We get to see her collection of trinkets and tokens from 1,000 worlds. Jod tells her they're from At Attin, talking about the kids. And then she says At Attin is very interesting as an astrogation problem, which is the name of the episode, which I've probably failed to mention. Very interesting names for these episodes, which I actually do like. She brings out a scroll, trying to help them find their planet. The scroll's on paper. Like one of maybe 4 now instances where we had paper in Star Wars, which I thought was significant, right? Because it would make sense. I mean, I know Lucas was always like, hey, there is no paper, and they kind of broke that down a number of years back, I think, of course, during the Disney era. But now this is like the 3rd or 4th time, and so far it's been consistent, right? Where there is paper, we're talking old Republic, Dawn of Jedi. I don't know how far back yet, because the timeline's kind of squishy now at this point, but it was interesting that we had a literally paper scroll that was rolled out of sorts. Just want to point that out there. But she says that their home has purposely been hidden from the rest of the galaxy, and there is no map to At Attin. So that confirms that, hey, no one knows where this planet is. I think that speaks to the barrier, some of the theories that we threw out there about what that really is doing. Not necessarily keeping people in or out. Certainly that's a disguise. It's something to misdirect people, but its real purpose is to cloak the planet so that no one knows. No, I'm not going to get into that right now. I've got other questions here, but we won't do that now. But we get into anything you want to add into that before we get into some of the lighter stuff here with Jewels of the Old Republic.
No, let's do it.
All right. So she then brings up the Jewels of the Old Republic on this scroll, talks about how these planets of wonder have been kept hidden for their protection, or they were hidden for protection at some point. Long ago, all of them were destroyed except for one. This
interesting.
Yeah, it lines with legends. There were many planet killers, destroyers before the Death Star. That wasn't a new concept or novel idea that Palpatine just had. I mean, he went back and pulled a lot of that from old Republic type stuff. So when we get into the jewels of the Old Republic, that's some of the stuff that I do want to, I'm going to kind of bring some of that stuff up as other examples of stuff that would blow up planets. And maybe that does get worked into a little bit later. And she talks about Attin as now only remembered in children's stories, pirate shanties, and rumors believed by fools. But I believe, and it feels like this is kind of her white whale. Like it almost got the sense that she's, this planet has always been out there. It's her Atlantis, right? To kind of go back to that analogy that we threw out there in the Patreon, where she has been actively looking and searching, and suddenly, maybe the trail went cold and she finally just gave up, and suddenly these kids walk in and she's like, oh my God, we're back, right? I've got new information here to find this planet. And I say all that because, not to jump ahead, but when she leaves, or when the kids leave, she tells KB, call me if you need me, or whatever it is, right? And I thought, well, how is she going to even do that? But if this really is something that Kim has been obsessed with, right, for a very long time, then it is possible she could go down the same path or the same trail that they are, right behind them. And so that would be an opportunity for them to kind of meet up again. But anyways, I guess anything you want to say there before we get into some of the other details that we get about these jewels of Old Republic, and then of course At Attin.
Well, like you said, I like that there's a certain historical element to it, right? And so while we don't necessarily have paper in Star Wars, it's nice that we have something that references it that doesn't feel, it feels really old, and it has that historical remnant to it. And then I don't know if this is her white whale necessarily, because she's in an observatory, so clearly she has an interest in all of these celestial bodies and the history of the galaxy and where things are at, and these mysteries, I think, probably really not weigh on her, but just interest her. And that's her, maybe it is like her white whale, I don't know. But these mysteries of the galaxy, you always feel like you're never gonna have a chance to solve them, and then when it lands in your lap, you get giddy like a little schoolgirl, right?
Right?
So to speak, to quote Last Crusade. It's just it's nice to see that, though. And it was nice to see this character kind of get excited about that. You could feel the energy and the way that they were using the crest from the backpack from Fern, right, was able to be deconstructed. And you see, and again, I think the numbers, I've seen some analysis out there online where they actually do show like the number 9 or something like that. So the 9th planet, and things like that. And this proto-republic, and some of the things she just starts, speaking about are just seeming like gibberish. I mean, what was her thing? Like Palmerish numerals? Like what the heck is Palmerish? Like we don't know what that means, right? That's a brand new term for us, I believe. And so, like, what are all these things that she's just kind of rolling off and she's getting excited about it? And it's funny because then Jod, or Crimson Jack, what do you want to call him, comes up and is like, you're all getting this energy, and then she just like starts to slow roll it all of a sudden. Yeah. She's not very subtle about it, but it was nice to see something like that and give the kids hope, I think, in some regard as well, of someone in the galaxy who is actually really genuinely concerned for them, while it overlays with their curiosity about a seemingly lost planet and the idea behind it, but it's more intellectually based and historical based and mythological kind of sense to it, rather than we're chasing treasure and looking to get rich.
Yeah. There's when she's going through the process of trying to she then goes into the process of elimination, right? Trying to rule out as many planets as she can, locations for the planet as she can. And she starts asking the kids questions, and she brings up, what part of the galaxy, and she's like, oh, we think we're near Coruscant and Alderaan. And she says, missed the war, did you? And so that was one of the things we talked about, right? I think that was a hard confirmation that they are secluded. They have not been in contact with many of the events for a very long time that have been happening outside in the galaxy at large. I think we talked about, I think we were both in the same, this is likely, they've probably, their last timestamp was during the Old Republic, right? I think they've missed everything, but we'll, again, go back to the Patreon show. We'll probably talk more about that here this weekend. Neil does kind of chime in and says that part of the great work that is they're supposed to stay inside the barrier. She asked what the barrier looks like. They say when they see it at night, it looks like a swirl. She says nebular gases. And I thought that's interesting because when I went and did some light research on nebula gas, because I only thought that was out there, existed as kind of a way to birth planets and where planets go to die kind of thing. And that was the case, at least from our real science. But the fact that there's nebula gas being released within the planet, and I'm like, whoa, that's kind of interesting. I don't know if there's anything there. I want to talk about that more on Sunday. I don't want to get into it now because I've got some theories and some ideas of what's going on there. But all of that said, we did get confirmation that this planet has been hidden. And that's why it's eluded so many people over the years for hundreds of years, if not thousands at this point. And then she takes the symbol, like you talked about this, she split this up. I saw some videos even before this came in, way back when they first released the trailer and we could see that crest on Fern's jacket. There were a number of videos that went through and tried to decipher this, decode it. I haven't really put a lot of thought into the symbols themselves and what they meant, but it's interesting that she did rip those apart and then talked about the Proto-Republic artifacts and all that stuff. We're going to talk more about that on Sunday. I know, unless you got something you want to add into that right now.
I think even when we're trying to look at what she rolled out in the scroll, right, when she was talking about the Jewels of the Republic, like trying to decipher some of the text, you could clearly see the text, so you could try to write it down, but it's like some weird mix, mismatch of the Arabesh that we know and something that maybe is an older version of it, or something that effect, maybe like the kind of a lost and evolved language thousands of years ago, to where we don't necessarily understand what that means. And maybe this has a correlation to what we've seen a still on of Jod, touching the wall with other, potential language on the wall too. So I'm presuming there's a connection between all of that, but even when we tried to translate some of this stuff, you really can't make total sense of it. And then some of it just looks like gibberish. So, and then some of it's just really basic information, that's not really all that interesting. So it's kind of a weird puzzle to try to piece together a new alphabet of sorts, or a revised alphabet to an existing language that we have.
Yeah. I want to put this up there right now. So Starlight Archive, if you guys aren't following them on Blue Sky, that dude stayed up all night and deciphered this. Like, he was up the entire night deciphering the entire thing. He was the first one, at least with my,
He actually figure it all out.
Yeah. So a lot of it is written down. A lot of it doesn't make sense. There's pieces that are missing. And again, this is stuff that I want to cover on the Sunday show, so I don't want to necessarily break it down, but I did want to credit him for putting in the effort and the work. I mean, the dude put in the hours overnight to get all this stuff, because by like 2-3 in the morning, the whole thing had been deciphered already, at least what you could make out anyways. And so great job. Please follow him. He's a great person. I need the same name on other social media platforms as well, but I would say this too, like the one takeaway, there are some things in there that I think are certainly worth discussing, but there wasn't any like jaw dropping, like revelation kind of bits and pieces in what was decoded, but it certainly is intriguing. And it continues to kind of flesh out this larger picture of what they're talking about with the jewels in the Old Republic and all that stuff. So,
right.
Okay. So, Jod realizes that she's stalling. Suddenly he reaches over, he grabs that little comm thing. He can hear the X-Wings trying to come in, trying to contact her. And he tells him he tells her, hey, call them off, call off the cops. Kim then tells the kids that he wants their treasure, that she tells him, look, I called the New Republic for you, right? Trying to appease to the kids, like, I'm doing this for you. And I think she's sincere in that. I think she was legitimately doing that. I think there was a comment that she made earlier on that made you think, okay, she was not like, she's not for him. She doesn't like him, but she realized that these are just kids, and they're likely there against their own will, or he's kidnapped them, right? She's thinking the worst here. But she does let them know, like, look, this is, I did this for you guys. You see, I think she says run for it, which I thought was funny, because she says run for it, and then she flies off, which was funny. They get into a fight. The kids are struggling. Much like us in the audience at this point, we're lost and thinking, okay, who do we believe here? Is it Jod? Is it her? I don't know who honestly is the good person. I think by the end of it, I think we're probably all in favor of Jod, at least for now. But then he starts this.
I think Kim was pretty genuine, though. I think was what she was trying to help.
I think she was too. But Jod then takes the punch card. He blasts all the computers that are there, and tells the kids to let's go, and they head out. And I love the kids are literally like, what just happened? Like, we have no idea what is going on here, right? There's some kind of lover's quarrel that's just erupted between these two characters. And this is where Kim and KB have that quick conversation, right? Where she says, did he tell you to trust your gut? And that kind of is like eye-opening for her, like, whoa, wait a minute. How did you know that kind of thing? She says, use your head, get the truth. And if you ever need help, you can call me anytime. So I have a question about how. I think maybe it's because she would be following them, but they don't really, I was really trying to put my head around, like wrap my head around, like, how is she going to contact her if she didn't know where they went to? Maybe she finds them in the coordinates and she goes back, but there's not like a comm device or anything like that. So I have a feeling they're going to, like, it feels like they left that intentionally because Kim will show up at some point down the road. I just don't know how to connect those two dots just yet.
Yeah, or maybe it's like going to be like Bad Batch where we don't ever hear from, what was her name, the Trandoshan, ever again.
Oh, yeah. She just kind of disappeared.
Just kind of disappeared, yeah. I don't know how they would contact her. Maybe on the punch card, the data card that they use for the coordinates, maybe there's something in there. You know, she left her calling card in there. Her business card is attached to it, her signature in the email. I don't know if there's something in there that's she'd be able to tie back to it, or if she just, since KB's got this thing on her head, maybe she's the techno whiz of the group and she would figure it out. But that part left me a little confused as to how she would expect these kids to be able to navigate that type of research and figure out this person who they know her name is Kim. I don't know if the spelling that they have, it's a very interesting spelling. I don't know if it's like they have a phone book or anything to go look her up. So how you do it, I don't really get that.
Well, Humphrey Bear's got the answer. Time travel.
That's the answer for everything. That and multi-dimensional travel.
Yeah. So World Between Worlds, I think, is what he's saying, has been confirmed. They'll use that to contact her. I don't know.
That's what the barrier is really made from.
There you go. Sure. Why not? Draco says maybe there's a redial function in the ship's comms and they can find out how to contact her through how Jod contacted her. So,
well, he just showed up though, right?
I think so. He just said, "Hey, I know a friend, and we're going there," and that's why he parked away. And she looked as surprised as him until she saw him on the monitors. So,
right.
They head back to the ship. Love the moment of Neil falling down. I don't know if you caught that. He falls down the sands as they're walking on the moon. The kids, demand, look, we want the truth at this point. And Jod tells them that, he'll tell them the truth. They'll get all the answers as soon as they get on the ship. And to your point, like how many times in the Acolyte, not to point that out because it's happened many times in other Star Wars content, but just most recently in the Acolyte where someone just says, "Oh, just do this," right? We don't need to confront this right now, even though it's probably the most important thing. He tells them to get on the ship, and they're like, "No, we're not doing this." And then Fern calls 33, which he kind of shows up, right? Brings in the muscle of the group to say, "Look, you're not getting back on the ship until we get some answers here." I love that KB was able to use that little PA system thing that she used to tease Neil and Wim back on At Attin. We got to see her use it here to kind of call down the X-Wings. And he says, "The truth is, I'm just like you, okay? I'm lost. I'm alone." This was the quintessential Goonies moment of the series right here. And I don't want to, you haven't seen the movie yet, but that's what this part felt so Goonies when he said that line. He says it with a lot of passion. Like this felt like, yeah, I know it's hard to trust him because of his character and some of the things he's done, some of the things he said, but there was something very genuine about this. I truly believe that was a lot of internal emotion that was starting to come out, especially given where he had just lost his entire crew and there was a mutiny and he was left for dead essentially in this cell to rot, right? For however long. It did feel like this was him coming clean, at least with that part of it. But did you take that as well? Or do you think this was just him being dramatic and doing whatever he needs to do to get on the ship because it's a fight or a flight kind of thing?
Well, I think it goes back to some of the questions we had at the top of the show about whether he was a Jedi at one point. Mm-hmm. Because if he survived Order 66, that passion and the emotion behind what he was saying and how it came out, you could see where that would be very genuine. Like he felt alone, had no one he had to hide. All the things that we've seen on screen so many different times of the aftermath of Order 66. If he would have experienced all of that, then that emotion would have been very real. And I'm with you. I think it felt very genuine. I think it was the first time we had really kind of seen the true Jod, if we want to just call him Jod as his real name. The first kind of moment we've had that where we've had a real raw moment from him that didn't feel like an act.
Right.
And I think even the kids kind of finally were like, okay, I think we may have got a real answer from him finally, or at least maybe that satisfied Fern for the moment. That felt like, okay, I am just like you, and adults feel this way too, and that's okay. But can we move along now, please?
Yeah, right. We got to get on the ship, kind of thing.
I liked it. I thought it was a wonderful moment though of just kind of final transparency, and I like that you brought it up. I like that the kids had to force this out of him though too, and they drew their line in their proverbial line in the sand and said, "Look, no more until we do this. We finally have the upper hand here." And Fern clearly had the high ground on the ramp. And so he knew what that meant because he's a Jedi, right? So with the X-Wings going around, he knew he was done for if he didn't make this right call. And calling in SM-33 was fantastic too. Of like, I'm bringing in the enforcer, and he's like all ready to do it. Right, he bows up and ready to roll. And so I like this. I like that we finally had something resembling a genuine moment though for Jod, and something I'm hoping that continues to pop up from time to time. But let's not go overboard with it quite yet, because we're not gonna. He's gonna double down on the act now as a result of that. Because once you feel vulnerable and exposed, what do? You double down on the act. You double down on the persona that you want to project out to these kids in particular.
Yeah. I'm still giggling that you worked in a episode 3 reference to the high ground. I hadn't even thought about that with the platform and all that. So
yeah,
nicely played.
I'm telling you, it's everywhere in Star Wars. You don't mess with it.
Yeah.
He says, and he's a Jedi. He knows.
Yeah, he does know. He's heard the stories. No, he hasn't. But he says that he says, look, I actually never said that. You called me Jedi. That's something you did. I never said that.
That was another interesting comment. So, do you think that shows that he's not a Jedi, or he just hasn't been one in a very long time? Did you interpret that one way or the other?
Well, hold that thought, because I want to get it to it when we have a question specifically about this, and so I'll address it there. But he makes a deal with them, right? He'll get them home. Maybe he gets a little, right? Which is really what he wants. I love that he kind of downplayed that. Like, it's really, maybe I'll get a little bit, maybe I'm not. But he definitely wants a partnership. They agree to hire him, which I think is an interesting take and spin. We'll see how that plays out throughout the rest of the series. So I think technically he works them, because he does say deal. So that, and maybe he reneges on that because of the situation. He's just trying to get them on the ship. So he'll say whatever and agree to whatever at this point. But then nonetheless, they get on the ship. Jod doesn't want 33 helping out to kind of navigate and put all the coordinates into hyperdrive. He does mention that if you rely on a droid, they'll let you down. I assume there's a backstory there, very Mandalorian of him, very Din Djarin of him. Right. Maybe it could be an Order 66 thing again, similar to what happened with Din, right? He has that trauma of what was going on back then, or other Jedi at the time, but he's had a bad experience with droids, right? So there's X-Wings are trying to hail him at this point, right? They're trying to get them to kind of stop. And then Neil is given the steering, right? The throttle or whatever, the yoke. And that was a nice little moment that we got to finally see on screen, played out, that we'd saw in the trailer, where he's like, Neil, like, why did he get to fly this thing? But I thought it was cool that Wim and Fern got the better position, right? They got to go into these cockpits and sit down. And Alex mentioned it earlier. It was very much a Last Starfighter kind of thing, where they got to rotate around. They were just having the time of their life shooting at, for us, the New Republic, the good guys.
The good guys, right? Yeah.
But they were the goons, according to them. So, and I think it tracks, because they wouldn't necessarily know one way or the other, honestly, right? They have no concept of what time they're really in. They may not have ever even seen an X-Wing or a pre-model like a Z95 Headhunter or whatever else. I mean, they just don't have any of that knowledge. They don't have any of that baggage. So for them, it's like, hey, he tells us to shoot these guys. They're trying to shoot at us, so let's do it. But they have the best time shooting down, or at least shooting them. And KB starts working on the Navicomputer at this point. There's a great moment there where Wim shoots one of them, and then Fern gets really upset. We talked about that kind of rivalry that they had going on in the first 2 episodes. We see that surface again here.
She said it was her shot. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I wondered if
probably was her shot.
It probably was her shot. That'd be interesting if that does come up a little bit later. There's an ion blast that hits one of the engines and kind of cripples it just temporarily. And then Jod kind of stepped in and did this little cool maneuver where he took it really low onto the surface and then kicked up the thrusters, which shot a bunch of smoke, dust, whatever that was, back into the X-Wings, view that blinded them, gave them enough time to get out of there. They shoot off into space and jump into hyperspace. And then it ends with the X-Wings coming in. And when that X-Wing thought opened up, I saw you guys talking about it in Patreon. I had my fingers crossed and I was going, please be Carson, please be Carson, please be Carson. And I had no family looking at me like, what are you talking about? But I really wanted to be like a Carson Teva, or, maybe a Zeb, or
anybody we already knew. Yeah.
Anybody we knew, but it wasn't. And maybe that's okay too. I didn't, it wasn't heartbreaking by any means.
Missed opportunity.
I was just really hoping it was going to be somebody, because they had kept them very secret, and, you heard the voices, but you really couldn't put a plan in. I mean, I don't know. It was cool. I was fine with it, but they asked if they know where they're going. This is where Kim gives us the final line. If I told you, you wouldn't believe me. Does she look at the camera? Does she break like the fourth wall when she says that?
It kind of seems that way, but I'm assuming
Or
she's
she's
looking
looking
off
off
into
into
the
space?
distance
Okay,
as to
okay.
where maybe they left.
Yeah.
But
It was a cool little moment though, even though like I said, they haven't broken the fourth wall. Then I said, oh, well, maybe they did do that. But anyways, anything you want to say about that final sequence, that whole thing there?
seeing Wim's reaction, he was like a kid in a candy store. He was just so excited. And what was really cool though is when Fern like actually, cocks a grin, and you could just see that she's actually like, okay, this is kind of fun. Like this is better than racing bikes, type of thing. But I think the other part I really liked about this is everybody had a job. Like everybody except for SM33, who was just kind of absent for all this, which was kind of interesting. But all of the kids and Jod, everybody had a job. They were all a crew, doing their part for it. So it was kind of the first time we've seen everybody doing something at the same time where they actually felt like they were all contributing in some way. And I'm not saying they all know what they're doing. I mean, clearly one's flying the ship and like a drunk sailor, and then the other two are just, idly or just blindly firing anything that moves just to try to ward them off. I'm surprised they didn't do like Indiana Jones's dad and shoot off the tail fin or something like that as a result, right? And so I get a lot of Indiana Jones references kind of leaked into here of sorts as well in that same era. But I just like that they're all actually working in concert with one another to an extent for really kind of the first time that we've seen, which is really nice to see that.
Yeah, they're working as a skeleton crew, right? They're working as a crew, working as a team.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into the questions. We'll try to wrap this up very quickly. I don't want to go any longer here than like 8 minutes if we can, but I know you had a couple things. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, before we get started, so thanks to Joe Woods, Bill, and Mr. Pink, who had some questions for us around At Attin. We did go ahead and answer those in Patreon, but you were entered into the contest for the drawing, though, for this week. So I wanted to give them a shout out and say thank you for the questions there, but we have already answered them. So in the interest of time, we'll keep this going. Maybe I'll just ask you the first one here. We kind of talked about this already. Music Train from Patreon. How many kids will be force sensitive? Just KB, no, any of the others?
I'm going to go with KB as the likely candidate at this point, but to your point earlier, I just don't, at least right now, 3 episodes in, I can't see anybody else being force sensitive. And I'm not going to say put a lot of stock into her being force sensitive. You made a great point about her being just, augmented. And so maybe that was why she was able to sense that petroleum droid back on Borgo. But that was probably the first sign that we saw that. So that's my answer. What about you?
Yeah, I think at this point she's the likely candidate if you had to pick one, but I kind of like the idea of none of them being force sensitive, and then it's just an adventure.
Right. Okay, thank you, Music Train. Let's go to Mike Draco on Blue Sky. He's with us tonight also. Says, Jod used a force ability I don't think we've seen since A New Hope, distracting people by making them think they've heard a sound. We know he's Captain Silvo, but do you think he was ever a Jedi?
Yeah, we've kind of beat around the bush on this one a little bit. I'm actually torn now, because if you didn't give me the last part that we just talked about where he said, I'm just like you, I'm alone and whatever, I would have been like, no, probably not. He learned to use the force, like he said at the beginning of the episode, practice and all of that. But now you kind of wonder, and I think some of the things you were saying too, of like, you get some of these more philosophical moments, right? These deeper meaning type of moments. Do those have it? And you start to lean that it's entirely possible that he did experience Order 66 and he was part of the order and had to go underground, and becoming a pirate, he's not the only one that did this, right? And so I think this is probably above a 50% chance at this point, I think, in my book. What about you?
Well, I'll keep it short too. We talked a little bit before we came on the air about this. I think prior to this episode, I was like, no, there's no way he's a Jedi. There's no way he's a Padawan. I was fully of the opinion that he was force sensitive. But because of the things that happened in this episode, the reverence, the philosophical thinking, the way he did there, and then just his outburst of emotion about feeling alone, which could be attributed to the fact, again, that he lost his entire crew and there was a mutiny and all that. But there could be some really deep-rooted, emotional trauma there from something like Order 66. We did the math. It's very plausible that he could have been a Padawan. So I think the short answer is he a Jedi? No. Was he a Padawan? Maybe. But I think I'm still of the opinion that he's just force sensitive and either has, was adjacent of some sort. And I know I say that, but all I mean is that maybe he does have some kind of wisdom back then, or was about to be trained, or he was aware that Jedi were around and Padawans were around. And so there was a reverence, and he looked up to those folks and really wanted to be a part of it. Maybe he was never allowed to because he was too old at that point. I don't know, but it does feel like he's got some knowledge. We'll just leave there.
Yeah, and just to be a little more transparent. So before the show, we were talking about kind of where his age is, and if we believe the characters, we just call it maybe around 50 years old. Like if you work backwards, he would have been maybe late teens or 20 by the time when the Republic fell.
Yeah.
So the likelihood that he would have been found by the Jedi in those first 20 years of his life seems to be a little bit higher. So I think that's where the question mark kind of comes in. Would they have found him at that point or not? But let us know what you think, Mike, in the comments, so we could highlight that. That'd be interesting. Yeah, so thanks for the question, Mike. So Big T and Little T podcast over on X said, and this is why I said this earlier, man, we need just to show, this will be our Patreon from a certain point of view show. What is your favorite Easter egg so far in the series? Only one. I don't want any. I don't want any honorable mentions. None of that stuff. Save that for a couple of months from now. Just give me one Easter egg that has lit your fanboy fire.
Well, I was going to reach back there and grab my VHS copy of Battle Endor, but I'm going to go with Teak as being and again, I don't know if it's the Teak or if it's just a Teak. I haven't seen explicitly, but in my head, at least in my head canon, that is actually Teak. He left Endor, went on to live a better life here on Borgo, and is now a wee ferryman. So that's been that. But I do like the holiday special as well. But yeah, you're right. There's so many of them. They've done a really good job. And some of these are in your face, some of them are not. Some of them are very subtle, and some are deep cuts. Like
some of them are really deep.
Yeah, some of the ones we talked about tonight. But what's yours?
I really want it to be all the Pirates of the Caribbean references because I just love that movie so much. But I think at the end of the day, it's probably Hondo's ship. Like just because I am so damn ready for Hondo to be president. I was talking with people that work about this too. They're like, yeah, Hondo, where's Hondo? And people I think in Discord were also like, Hondo, we want Hondo. Everybody wants Hondo. Let's bring Hondo, everybody. Let's bring him. Let's do this.
There he is.
Yeah.
That may be
in my
all
heart
we get
and in my studio. Him. So.
All right. Thank you guys. Big T and Little T podcast. Thank you guys. Check them out. They're on social media platforms. Just look that up. I've got it up there on the screen right now. Adam Jung via email says, do you think Jod has a connection to the Onyx Cinder? He seemed to recognize it and knew its layout.
I'm going to go with no, actually. I think he's just kind of wandering the ship. I think you've seen one ship, you kind of seen them all. I think with a captain with a lot of experience, you start to navigate them with a fair amount of certainty and knowledge of how they work, but then you explore and kind of get the lay of the land on your own. So I'm going to go with no. I think this thing has been buried well longer than he's been alive. So even if he's heard of it, and again, while he asked what the ship name was, no one answered, right? SM-33 didn't answer. No one answered what the ship was called. So I think we will probably get a better clarity of this later on when we actually hear the name of the ship. I'm assuming we're going to hear the name of the ship in this series, but it might be a ship lost to memory and lore. And I think you would probably said some of that in the first episode or maybe our final hype show, that it just might be kind of a fairy tale ship at some point, potentially. Like it found At Attin, but it crashed and no one ever heard from it. So it's just kind of myth at that point. But
yeah.
What do you think? Do you think he has any connection to it or maybe just knowledge of it?
It's the, the ship of legends, and I don't know, the Titanic comes to mind. That's really not the best example of a ship.
No, it's probably something we can all relate to. Though,
yeah,
right?
But something we could, thank you, something we can relate to, right? There are people that are obsessed with it. They've heard the stories, the legends, and that sort of thing.
It's almost like Amelia Earhart's last.
Yeah, like if you
kind of thing.
Right. It shows up and you've got some, you may have studied it and you've thought about it and hope to find it someday kind of thing. I think when we didn't get to see him really walk around the ship too much, but when he was kind of walking around it after he got on the ship, especially, I think that was his first time to really kind of get a lay of the land. And I'm not going to say every ship's the same because that's definitely not the case, especially if this is going to be an Old Republic ship, but he did enough to he did enough reconnaissance that we saw and probably off screen that we didn't see that allowed him to kind of know where the turret drops were, right, for the turret things and know where the food's at and just familiarize himself with the ship. I think as a former captain of ships, this is probably something he's going to know how to do all that. So I like the idea. It'd be really cool if he had some kind of connection, but I think that's probably as much as we'll get there.
Right.
So thank you,
next
Adam.
question. Yeah, thanks, Adam. Next question is from Routini on Patreon. We've kind of talked about this one too. So maybe briefly, how much do the citizens of At Attin know about what's going on outside their planet? Do some people have more information than others?
And I think, yes, I do. I think that, especially with this episode, and to be continued, but it does feel like the citizens know, they think they're doing some great work. They may not know exactly what the great work is. And there might be a hierarchy that some people know more than others. I think there was a lot more to Utini's question. It was more nuanced in this. I think he was talking about, hey, the parents like Wendell and Farah seem to kind of be in that upper crust of the hierarchy of the people, right? And so they may have knowledge as well, more knowledge than your average citizen who does, I don't know, whatever basic job there is. But I do think that at some point it is going to be an eye-opening experience. I don't think they're being told the truth, and I love that. That creates certainly challenges and tension from a story perspective, because now they have to go fight against the system to get their kids back, and the exposure that could bring about here later down the road. What does that mean? All that is super intriguing to me. But what do you think on this one?
Yeah, I mean, how much do the citizens know about what's going on outside their planet? I think basically nothing at this point. I think
agree.
Like you said, there's probably very few people that do. The supervisor is the most likely candidate, and maybe there's a small circle around him or her that also would know something about what's going on. But it seems very unlikely that they've got a huge touch point, and they've definitely shielded the rest of the population from this for whatever reason this might be, to protect them at one point. But what's the purpose now is the real question, and
yep.
something I hope continues to get explored here.
Okay. And I've got one last question. This did not make it into tonight's. We're going to talk about it tonight, but we already drew the name, so we'll carry this one over into next week. So this is from the Awesome Village podcast via Blue Sky. Thanks, guys, for chiming in. Do you think Jod Na is an escaped Padawan who became a scoundrel like Kanan Jarrus? There's a second part of the question that says, if he is, do you think we'll see him ignite a hidden away lightsaber at some point? I love this question because it's a big Rebels vibe, going on.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely does have the Rebels vibe, right? And what was cool about Kanan was, for a long time, he had it split into two pieces to be able to mask it, right, with the with the Empire and all of that. So
yeah.
I think, to answer the latter part, no, I don't really want to see a lightsaber in the series. I think that would maybe take away from some of what we have going on here. I think it would probably ignite Wim's brain on fire, which would be kind of fun to see that reaction or whatnot. But I think right now, Jod has nothing. I think it's part of where I'm coming from. Like, Jod literally has the clothes on his back and a sword that he's stolen from a corpse. And that's about it, and a blaster. That's about all he's got. So I don't know that we'll, unless there's a hidden cache or he's got some safe house or type of thing, I don't know that we would see a lightsaber come about. But maybe the original question, though, of is he an escaped Padawan? Again, I'm kind of, before I would have been, I was really close to basically a 100% no. He's not a Jedi in any kind of training, even a Padawan, nothing like that. I liked the idea of a pirate learning to use the Force kind of on their own. But like you said, with some of the dialogue we've got and with the impassioned speech at the end of the episode, it just seems like there is something there. So there is a certain appreciation and knowledge for it, of the Force and for the Force. And so I think it seems more likely now than well before. I'm going to give that above a 50% chance that he's definitely been affiliated with the Jedi at some point in some capacity.
Yeah. And just to recap, whether he's an escaped Padawan, no. But I love the idea, and I think it's closer now that this episode has come out. I feel more comfortable if that turns out to be the case, and actually pretty excited if that turned out to be the case. The second question about whether or not he's got a hidden lightsaber at some point. No, probably not. I don't see him having a lightsaber. If he definitely doesn't have it on him, right? He's already been stripped and everything else. So, maybe at some point he's like, hey, we got to make a pit stop somewhere. And, he picks up his lightsaber that way. If he does have one, that's a possibility, but I don't think he actually has one. Now, I do, and all that said, again, I actually do like the idea of, if he did bring that out, what that would be like for Wim, right? He's been thinking about Jedi for so long and never thought he'd ever see them. And then, as an audience, we wouldn't think to see one because of what, the time era, what's going on right now. And suddenly he does pull out a lightsaber. I think that would be a pretty cool experience. So I'm not entirely against it, but I just don't think it'll happen. So, okay. So we pulled the name ahead of time, and who was the winner?
Yeah, we did. Drum roll, please. It was, we picked number 3, which was Mr. Pink over on Patreon. So Mr. Pink will reach out to you on Patreon and get your information to send you a poster. Thank you so much for all of your questions, everybody. Again, Awesome Village will make sure you're part of next week's drawing, and go ahead and get ready. If you didn't get your question in this week, certainly let us know. If we've already answered it, that's fine. Just go ahead and ask us a question there on social media, on the YouTube site, wherever you feel most comfortable, Patreon, Discord, wherever. And then when episode 4 comes out, be sure to give us some questions there. We'll continue to highlight these on air and give them some attention there too, especially if it's something really kind of interesting we haven't thought of. Those are always a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, thank you guys for all your questions. Thank you for participating in this. We still have a lot of posters, like Jonesy said, to give away, and throw them in there at any point. Like you said, wherever you can. We'd love to get those and accumulate many of them, so we got something to talk about next week when we do it.
You know what I like to accumulate many of, Albert?
What's up?
Live stream viewers. They're amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Like all the people in our chat tonight: Stephanie, Mike R, Mike D, Mike, my Star Wars guys, a lot of Mikes, a lot of M's, Alex, Reader Reborn, One Up versus CPU, Sky, Humphrey Bear, Dante, all making an appearance. We saw all you folks out there in the background too. We hope you will come by and say hi next time. CantidaCast.com/YouTube if you are listening to this. If you want to follow us on Patreon, CantidaCast.com/Patreon. We have a show this Sunday, again, uncovering the jewels of the Old Republic, and Tommy making an appearance right there at the very end as well. Make sure we give him a shout out too. So thank you. And I said Sky? Yes, Sky came in right at the tail end of the opening credits. So thank you all so much for coming out tonight. We really do appreciate it.
Yep. And don't forget to like this video. If this is your first experience with this, thank you guys for joining us. Please subscribe to the channel. That way you guys don't miss any shows that we do. And please go out and check out Jedi Novel Archive. Lauren is the third member of our show. She does almost exclusively, at this point, all exclusively, all of the breakdowns of novels and comic books. And we just did a fun holiday special last week where we talked about An Old Hope, which is one of the stories from a Life Day Treasury book. It's a Christmas story. It's about Santa Claus and Star Wars. I know that sounds crazy, but it makes sense if you think about it from a droid's perspective. But we just broke that down, had a lot of fun. We wore some crazy holiday Star Wars sweaters, and I almost died of dehydration about 45 minutes into that show. But yeah, please check out Jedi Novel Archive. And I think she just dropped also the Tempest Breaker breakdown as well. So awesome audio drama. So plenty of content there. So thank you guys again for joining us tonight. And please join us on Sunday if you're a Patreon member for the Jewels of the Old Republic. And we'll get into some more At Attin. I think there's a lot more there to discuss as well. So, all right, Jonesy, any final words before we close out?
Nope. Thanks, everyone.
All right, guys. We'll see you then.
You're still listening? Wow, that's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.